I'm delighted to be joined here today on this issue of the Audit Opinion with Steve Stagner, a fascinating individual who's really making some interesting things happen in the accounting profession. Steve, would you mind giving us a brief introduction?
Yeah, I guess as a brief introduction, I'd say about my career kind of goes across three chapters. The first chapter is more of an entrepreneurial chapter where I started as a small franchisee in the retail space in a company called Mattress Firm, where I started with like $1,300 in one store and built it up to a roughly 60 million-ish dollar business. And private equity had entered the space and bought out my franchisor and subsequently bought, my franchise. At that point, I became president and then subsequently CEO of Mattress Firm and took it from probably approximately 200 stores to approaching 2,800 locations uh, and $3.8 billion. Along that journey, there was a couple of different turns in private equity. I listed the company on NASDAQ, took it public, ran it as a public company CEO for 5 years, and um, and then sold it to a international company. And after a couple of chapters there, I retired from the retail world after 25 years, roughly, and started to work with a private equity firm based on the West Coast. Um, Great guys that really believe in people, and met. And the first company that I worked on was a platform that was owned by ZBS Partners, and that is Jake Sloan and Frank Zhang. Um, and they are the founders of Crete Professional Science. And that's where I first met Jake and Frank. Um, they had a very unique model. It can be called a partner model or a JV model. And so it was in the veterinary clinics industry. And so very successful. We partnered with about 200 veterinarians and had a really good outcome there. And I subsequently went on to work in a couple of other categories as executive chairman. I was the executive chairman of Alliance Animal, and then I got to work with a couple other categories, including the roofing space and the HVAC space. Took a role for a period of time as CEO of the HVAC space, and Jake called me about a little over a year ago, right around this month, and said, we've got this incredibly great platform. We've partnered with, at the time, I think about 16 different firms, and also very exciting was this partnership in our cap table with Thrive Capital. Um, and we think that, this is a great opportunity to apply the JV model, the partnership model, um, in this space. And given the technology disruption that's very real in the world, and especially the use case in the accounting profession, we're partnered with Thrive Capital, which many people know. They've invested quite heavily into OpenAI. So to have them at the table is truly a game changer, and very compelling and motivating. And so I've been here for since January. So that's those are the chapters.
What is it that caused you to really think I can take that background I have in retail, in so many broader professions, industries, and bring it to the accounting space? What is it that really inspired you to take on this new challenge in the accounting profession?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I would say is my focus is on structure, strategy, and scale, and it's somewhat agnostic to the space. Um, every organization, whether it be mattresses or HVAC or veterinarian clinics or roofers or accounting, there are professionals that do what they do really well. Okay, and they're great at what they do. Um, Scaling an organization, my background of going from one store, $1,300, and going through these stages of growth that every organization on the planet goes through, from entrepreneurial stage to scale and growth. It's a very different lift to create the culture. My focus is on the people, the process, and the technology, um, and it's really designed under the concept of helping unlock the intellectual capital hidden inside the organization, and it's creating a culture that allows the professionals to do what they do best, and it's very entrepreneurial based, and I'm not going to pretend to be an accountant. Um, but I think that provides a unique perspective. My retail background provides a perspective from the client journey, from the client experience, because all we thought about every day was the client. All we thought about was the customer and the experience that they have. And and I think that, having a fresh perspective can be a positive, but at the same time, I I'm in awe at what the amount of work and the effort that they do. So it's also surrounding myself with really great leaders that have deep domain experience. So together, we can create a really great experience for all of our stakeholders, which would be the end client, our partners at the partner firms, and certainly our shareholders.
What were your first impressions when you started to get involved in accounting and accounting firms? And what maybe was something you assumed and were correct with, and maybe something that surprised you when you first got involved?
I correctly assumed that they care deeply about their clients. I think that I also correctly assumed that it's a very, very grinding job, that there's a lot of work that has to be done, and there's not a one size fits all. So I kind of intuitively knew that. My father was an auditor, Pete Marwick, back in the day. So I grew up at the kitchen table, with an accountant, and I ran the accounting, at Mattress Firm, my franchise, for about 4 or 5 years. So I kind of had some, kind of general understanding and being a public company CEO, but um, getting into the grind, my surprises were really around. Uh, at least at the firms that we are working with, there's a surprise. Number one is there's a really big gap between what I'll call the rainmakers, the founders who have built the business, and the next generation. And that gap, that bridge is pretty far. Not in every case. There's we partner with a variety of firms. Um, but what happens typically, what I'm observing is there's a handful of firms that are really great at what they do, um, but there hasn't been a deliberate plan to kind of build up the next generation, a learning and development, a career path plan. And the second part of that is the incentive structure, really, really motivating the incentive structure. A lot of the firms have a bonus structure that's highly subjective, where they Mark, you did a good job this year. Here's what we're going to give you for your work. It's kind of the model, and um, it doesn't necessarily always align with the firm's results, or the firm's or the behaviors that we maybe want to incentivize and motivate to get to know your clients. The third thing is we we are in a world where um, we might want to really think about the fact that this technology disruption is happening so fast. We should be asking the question about how that's going to change our relationship with the client and how that's going to change the way we work. Because a lot of the mundane work, and this isn't, this is across the whole industry, and it's highly discussed, but a lot of the work that we do in this profession is going to get automated, and I think that that creates an incredible opportunity to spend more time with the client. And the question is are we skilled to have those conversations with the client? And I think there's an embedded fear factor of at certain levels to go out and actually sit down with the client and ask them about what's happening in their world, which could lead to cross-selling opportunities or incremental business. And at the end of the day, the easiest way I could describe it would be is we need to move from production mindset to strategic advisor mindset. And as a client myself, I you know I work with a top 10 firm. Uh, I get um, I get a list of things I need to turn in every year on a personal basis for my taxes. I get a bill and my taxes happen. What I don't get is I don't get a consultative approach about, how I could be thinking about what's around the corner, what's next. And And I think that, it's not really about how much I pay for my services. It's really about the value that I get. And I think we've got to shift towards the value that we can provide for our clients. And if you look at all the CE that happens in the space, I think we can dial up two areas. One is leadership, um, and two is client growth. Having a more deliberate approach for developing account development clients, account development strategies, to where we're talking more with them about what are their concerns, what is their situation, what problems are they facing, what are the implications of those problems, and how can we provide solutions, whether it be through us or relationships that we have. The accounting world knows more about me um, than I do in some certain cases. The professionals that work with me have very detailed information about me, but I want to hear their insights, and sometimes you don't hear that.
What are some of the areas that you're seeing some of the firms try to tackle that particular issue, or some of the ways that you and Crete are helping the firms that you're working with to try and bridge that gap and bring through that next generation of leader?
Yeah, it's a fabulous question, and it's a big challenge. So we're approaching it from a couple of areas. One is we've identified um, the quantity of partners that are kind of within the 5-year career horizon of retirement. Um, Two, we partnered with an advisor consulting firm called Lotus Blue to develop a framework for helping um, mitigate this challenge. And three, we're working on some internal succession planning workshops with all of our firms. So we're implementing that this quarter. So to start with the incentive structure and the work with Lotus Blue, the work with Lotus Blue is designed around creating a framework of performance management that identifies areas of not just production, but also leadership, client development, mentorship. And so putting some notional weights on how you incentivize behavior. So once you identify the next generation leaders in the process, so if we identify you, Mark, and we say, Mark, we sat down with you and we think that you have had such a great, track record with this. That's one of the criteria. We believe that you're positioned, for growth. There's a couple of areas we want you to focus on over the next couple of years. And so just being very intentional and deliberate about saying, here's what we'd like to do is have you focus on these things. We're going to assign a mentor with you. We want you to get in front of more clients, as an example, and just get that experience, get those reps in before you get there, so that when the rainmakers actually retire, we've moved the clients over a little bit, and we've also upskilled, through experience, experiential learning, those things. The second thing we're talking about is creating and implementing, but creating a currency, which is kind of a profits interest currency for certain players, so that they can get a taste of the outcome that could be meaningful to them. It could be a meaningful currency of equity, profits interest equity, that would further inspire them to do that. The third thing that we're doing is I've partnered with a leading university in the country that has some leadership and some client growth workshops. And we're bringing, here in early November, we're bringing, I think, around 30 people to this university setting. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have some capstone courses to where they can go through and learn, some leadership skills, and learn some client growth skills, some personal branding skills. To say it quite simply, we're trying to take this, back office accounting mindset and build it into an entrepreneurial, mindset. And look, not everyone will be, a rainmaker, but I have a deep background in selling, and a deep background in educating people um, around that framework. And what I've learned is that, building client trust and building relationships and quote unquote selling them on services and products is not about being a salesperson. It's about asking really, really, really deliberate, pointed questions, uncovering needs, and then providing solutions. And that's the heart of it. And it's not, you don't have to actually sell anyone at anything. All you have to do is just discover, where the pain points are, and provide solutions to them. And if those solutions are appropriate for the client, they'll do that, and you deepen the relationship. The relationship becomes stickier. The relationship grows in value, and that's what we're trying to focus on to help accomplish a lot of goals. And I think beyond just shoring up the firms for the next generation, I think it can be life changing for these younger individuals, to where they've been focusing all their CE on practice and on domain. Now focus on leadership. Now focus on client, and you add that to your skill set, and you just become unstoppable.
What are maybe a slightly more tactical list of, two, three, four, five things that that accounting firms can learn from retail that you think would make them better businesses?
Well, the first thing I would say is you have to ask the question, and this is not just retail, but it's every company, is why do humans go to work? And so I have a framework that I use that is how I've built, really all the companies I've worked with. And it's a if you visualize a Venn diagram of three circles, the first reason why humans go to work is individual growth. So if Bill Gates came to you, Mark, and said, "Mark, you're incredible. I really like you. I'm going to teach you everything I know and introduce you to everyone I've worked with, and give you the secret of how I built, Microsoft. You're going to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. I'm not going to pay you. What day do you start?" About 95% of the people say today. If I could work with, Warren Buffett or Bill Gates or whoever, and why do they do that? Well, that's because the perception and the prospect of individual growth is so fundamentally critical to how we are as human beings. We are built to grow. It's innate in us that humankind is built to grow. And so when you can tap into the growth, then what happens is you get this concept that I call um, uh, commitment versus compliance. And commitment is a choice that people make. Compliance is what you pay for. And so commitment is a choice and you can't force it. I can't say, Mark, be more committed. What I can say is I can influence you. And so if I'm growing you, then and I'm providing the opportunity for growth, then you feel really great. Now let's reverse that on that first Venn diagram circle. You know people, I know people who have left organizations, maybe you have, because you weren't growing. Even if you left for less money, because you weren't growing, you weren't being challenged. So if you reverse engineer the way you build your organization in an accounting firm towards individual growth, and it's one of the top things we hear. I was with a firm over the last 2 days that we're partnering with, and they're like, you got to hit, learning and development. And I'm super passionate about that. And I'm like, yes, exactly. So individual growth is the first pillar. The second one is cause. Why are we doing this? Every morning we get up, we drive to work, we drive home. Do you want to drive to work faster or to work than driving home? Or I guess in the post-COVID world, do you want to walk to your computer in your home office faster? Are you energized about the cause? So the cause is very important. So why are we doing this? Are we doing this to make EBITDA? Because that doesn't resonate with everyone. EBITDA is fuel for growth and it matters and profitability matters. But if all we talk about as a firm is EBITDA, 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 and money, 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 well, that doesn't motivate people to do anything inspiring. So what impact do we make on our proverbial world? What impact do we make on our clients? And it goes back to that whole client conversation that I was having about how we can individualize and anticipate their unmet needs and how we can do things. And so if our cause is greater than ourselves, I was able to recruit thousands of people every year to go sell mattresses at retail. So Mark, imagine calling your mom after you graduated college and say, I got a job. I'm going to go sell mattresses at retail. And she'd be like, hello? she, she would be frustrated. Like, what did I just pay for? And the way we were able to do that is we weren't selling mattresses. We were birthing a national chain. We were going border to border and coast to coast. We were teaching the critical work and life competencies that will help you for the rest of your life. Come here. We will get 200 hours per year of training to help you. And hopefully you balloon into grow into something really amazing because you are better off because you came here um, when you left. And if you leave, great. Just go on to do something amazing. And we subsequently, the inverse of that is we had lower turnover, higher productivity, 30% higher store averages than the 26 companies we bought, and 30% lower turnover. So if you invest in the people and you have a better cause, it matters. And then the third reason is reward and recognition. That currency I was talking about, paying people um, fairly, but also having a carrot matters, recognizing them. And recognition is free. Writing a personal note, handwriting. Who does that anymore? Right? Yeah, we live in such a digital world. Like acknowledging someone, on a call or acknowledging something someone did um, as leaders, and really, you can have the if then and the now that acknowledgments and rewards. Which if then is like the President's Club. Like if you guys hit X, you go to the Caribbean, in the President Circle. Um, that's very common in the. I don't see that a lot in the accounting space, but very common in the rest of the world. There's, incentive packages, and they're very if then. Now that is the surprise and delight. Mark, I noticed that you went out of your way and you did this amazing thing. Now that you did that, I want to acknowledge you. Who thinks about that? And so as leaders, I would say that if you really want to build a firm that has, um, commitment versus compliance in that sense, then you have to think about engineering your leadership around growth, cause, and reward. Growth, cause, and reward. Growth, cause, and reward. Just constantly thinking about that. And the actual work that you do will be done with greater care.
What are you seeing in terms of how the role that private equity investment and the influx of capital into the profession is doing for firms and the changes that it's being able to facilitate and drive for Crete and for the firms that are partnering with you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, first of all, private equity, there's been a tremendous amount of capital that's poured into private equity across many industries with varying degrees of success. Private equity has has created a lot of wealth and a lot of value and a lot of success and a lot of growth for a lot of organizations. And there are also some horror stories, which happen. And so I would say, first of all, not all private equity is equal. It kind of depends on the ethos. It kind of depends on what is the goal. So if you're considering, you know, where you want to partner, I would just recommend you kind of really dive into their ethos and what they're really trying to accomplish. Um, I've been on many sides of it. There's no way that Mattress Firm, as an example, would have become a national chain without private equity. It's impossible. Like, the access to capital, the access to talent was really, really amazing. Um, there are many examples out there where private equity gets in, and if you think about it, they use debt and they leverage it up, and then what happens is, if the business doesn't perform, then the covenants become very, concerning. And then what happens is they have to make cuts so that they can, kind of service the debt. And that's where some of the more horror stories happen. So, kind of having alignment on kind of like leverage, thresholds and stuff like that would be really important to understand. Um, because you want the business to have the room to be like an off-road vehicle to go through multiple economies, good and bad times, because every cycle is going to happen. But that being said, what we're doing at Crete is what I would say it just is very different from traditional private equity. In traditional private equity, they buy the firms and they pull them all together. And when they pull them all together, um, the value is created through the arbitrage of the collective pool. So you're kind of drifting with, if they overpay for some firms or some firms don't perform, then that could drag on your value and or cause um, the management team of the PE firm to invoke mandated changes across the platform. That's more of a traditional private equity model. Our model is a joint venture model. It's a what I call, we're PE, but we're partner equity, and so the PE stands for partner, not private. And what do I mean by that? Is that each of our firms that we partner with, we're just joint venturing with them and partnering with them, and their structural partnership is not tied to the other firms. They get the benefit of all the other firms. They get the benefit of the platform. And so the way I like to word it is, it's all about the T's and the C's. And I'm not talking about the traditional terms and conditions. I'm talking about that what we offer as a platform is access to talent, tools and technology, and capital, collaboration, and cross sell or client growth. And so the T's and the C's for us are, we're not here to run your firm. We're here to partner with you to help build by offering you access as an alliance with talent, tools, and technology, capital so that you can grow and achieve the vision that you have. Here's why it's subtly, distinctly important. When a founder sells or partners with another organization, it's very important that the incentive structure is aligned. um, because if they get bought out or bureaucratized out, if they get bought out or bureaucratized out, what leaves with them is the culture. and the culture is the oxygen that built the company. And so our model is different because we're keeping the oxygen in there, we're keeping the culture in there, because we're aligning with the founding partners to continue to grow it, versus, putting them in a pool. And yes, you could, other PE firms may say, well, we keep the brand the same, so nothing is going to change from that perspective. That's true, but the oxygen and the culture is really what matters most. And I call it the founders. There's a great book, but it's Founders Mentality, and it's that focus on, the what founders do, that insurgent mentality of how they're going to grow their business. And we do not want to risk that, because that's what we believe is growing. So we're the fuel behind it. That's what we're trying to do, is help fuel their vision, because many of them have hit a wall, and we think that we can help them, compete with the big four. We believe that there can be the big four, and then there can be the big one entrepreneurial alliance that is a good alternative to the big four. There's nothing wrong with the big four. They're incredible, great badge value, great reputations, great for clients, all that stuff. But there's an entrepreneurialism that many people want to go work for, and we want to preserve that. So for us, it's about preserving that, and for us, it's about, what's next, for them kind of starts with us. It's partnering with us.
Steve, I've loved this conversation. Thank you very much for all of the wisdom that you've shared and the energy that you bring to what you're doing. I wish you the best of luck with advancing the Crete journey. But thank you for everything you've shared here today.
Thank you. It was great talking to you, Mark.